Namaste, Sweta ji. I'm so glad to welcome you on this small little podcast show of ours for Global Menopause Collective. For the good of our audience, we have Sweta Vikram ji joining us from New York City. She is best-selling author of 14 books. She's a grief coach. She's a trauma-informed yoga teacher, international health speaker, and above all, an Ayurvedic doctor. So thank you so much for joining us on this show, Swetaji.
Thank you so much for having me on this podcast, Harmanjeet. People talk about social media and what's the point? And I think building intentional communities for meaningful, mindful, and compassionate conversations. This conversation, this interview is exactly a representation of that. So thank
Thank
you
you
for
so much
having
for appreciating the cause. Thank you so much. Today, Swetaji, I would want to bring up something very important, something very close to my heart, and I would want us to decipher it together. Something that most people feel, something most people have it in their systems but are afraid of expressing out. That's grief. And so many times people are unable to pinpoint a cause for that grief. So they'll keep reeling with it. They'll keep, learning how to survive with that. But they're never able to kind of pinpoint towards that. They'll keep scratching the surface but never reach the real wound. And that's my interpretation of why people kind of feel that heaviness, that guilt on their shoulders for a long time. Coming from me, I am carrying that guilt for a very long time now. I'll tell you a small little I'll I'll tell you a small thing. I mean, I've sailed for about 21 years of my life. I was in the merchant navy, and during that time, once I was back home, and my mother was going through menopause, and I'd never seen my mother in a low phase, in a depressive sort of a phase. So once that I came back home, I was married. I had my daughter. And I wanted to see somebody who was very happy, cheerful on seeing her son, but she wasn't. So when I approached her, I said, Mama, what's happened? Kya baat hai? Why are you not so cheerful? किसी ने कुछ कहा है, किसी ने कुछ बोला है. She says, Harman, and this line really hit me and stuck with me, She says, Harman, all your lives, all your, sister's life, your your children's lives now, all your problems were my problems. And when I required help, when I required some assistance, I was just put in a box separately and said that this is your problem. You handle it. And it wasn't directed onto me. It wasn't really, she was trying to blame me for that or whatever it is. But somehow I've been carrying that guilt for a very long time. That I wasn't there and I couldn't do much about it. And now when I am in a position, I'm able to decipher that, and probably this is something that I've decided to do for a larger cause. So many people ask me, why are you, being a man, talking about menopause? It's never going to affect you. You're not going to ever go through menopause. Why? You talk about cars, booze, girls, trips, mountains, bikes. Why are you getting involved in menopause? So, this is my established, firm belief that I want to get over this guilt of not being there for my mother. And I don't know how to unload that grief off my shoulders.
So, I am sorry about what you went through, but I've learned, Harmanjeet, that grief can also be a motivator, right? So you, in many ways, to me, it seems that you found your life's purpose, your dharma, and people go through their entire eternity not knowing what they want to do. That's why they're bouncing off. I studied in a boarding school, and one of our math teachers would say this to some of the girls: you're like Trishankus, never stable. And grief can do that to us. We are unanchored, right? But if we want, we can use that grief as that moment of transformation. But the transformation doesn't have to be, oh, me, it happened to me. I need to do this. No, how it's also part of the healing. I'm sure it's part of your healing being able to have these conversations. It's part of your healing being able to help others in this space, right? So I think that grief is very temperamental, but even though it's individualized, healing can happen in community. The more of us talk about what we are navigating, because it's interesting, and I'll share my why, but something that I wanted to touch upon. Very often people don't talk about their grief because there is a taboo. The large majority of the world is ignorant when it comes to grief. They think grief is contagious, they think they can evade it, they ignore it. And grief is the one thing that unfortunately doesn't discriminate. It'll hit each one of us at some point, if not multiple points. So having that empathy, sympathy, compassion can be very, very helpful. So in my case, no one wakes up and says, I'll become a certified grief coach. Obviously, there's a story. I've lost both my parents pretty early on, and they were both unexpected
I'm so
losses.
sorry to hear that. Yeah.
You and I wasn't sure if I wanted to become an Ayurvedic doctor, but losing my mom really young made me realize I couldn't find answers. Yes, I have so much respect for Western medicine, right? And it's so great for trauma and it's so great for so many things, but I couldn't find answers. Like, how did a person go from throwing a dinner to being dead? Like, there was a story that was missing, and I'm also a writer. Writing helps me anchor myself, helps me understand things that I might be trying to explore but don't have answers for. And that was my why. Like, how does that happen? And I couldn't be the only one who just woke up one day and on my way to see my parents, my mom was gone. Like it just was so bizarre to me, right? Then there was a point where
I'm
I
so
felt,
sorry to hear that. So
thank
sorry to
you,
hear that.
thank you. And I think it was the seed was sowed then, where I wanted to know more. Like, can we find that other stages to diseases? What could we have missed? So that was the big seed. But then I fell sick. There was a time, and my journey also brought me closer. I was already practicing Ayurveda, all of that, but not as a doctor. Um, and but then the pandemic hit, and I think I got more
Hmm.
deep. Like little rituals, small habit changes were impacting my clients, my yogis. And I felt like Ayurveda was such a holistic way of approaching wellness. It wasn't a replacement for Western science. I never tell people that. Not at all. But it can complement how you eat, how you live, how you move in the world, what you consume. All of that will impact who you become, and that impacts your overall health. Then came a time, I lost my father a few years ago, and he would tell me, and my dad was my buddy, and he would say, well, we need to normalize grief. People like
And
he
you
and
need to
I were so,
normalize grief. Wow.
yeah, he and I were very close, but so he told me about some stories about his life, but then we never talked about it because, to your point, men are supposed to be stoic. Why should men care if
Yes,
these issues,
absolutely.
right? And think about, and I'm not quoting any science, this is more a holistic conversation, right? Oftentimes women outlive men.
True.
And my
True.
big belief rooted in science is like the heart stories, right? We are not holding space for women in some ways, and we are not holding space for men in other ways. A man saying, I'm
Mhm.
feeling emotional, forget women, men will shun them. Why do you need to talk about this? Have a beer and
Absolutely.
chill.
Yeah.
Versus a
True.
loss is a loss. Just because I went through loss doesn't mean the other people in the family weren't impacted. As a woman, I have the privilege to be able to talk about this the way a man might not always, because he's expected to just show up, be functional. And it's so scary. This man shows up to work unhealed, still grieving, And imagine what that turns into at work in their homes. And same thing for women. When women are grieving, we are still thinking about, oh, have you spoken to the caterer? Is that arrangement?
Absolutely.
So put your grief on the
Absolutely.
side, come back to it 3 months later. So my why has been this dysfunction of patriarchy, misogyny, sexism, where I feel both men and women in their own ways are suffering, but also for trying to find compassionate ways around grief. Because Harmanjeet, the reality is, I live in NYC, right? And I live in one of the most diverse places in the world. It's not just a South Asian thing. It's across cultures where people are not always open to grief counseling, to therapy. So you always tell them Ayurveda is not a replacement for your therapy. You still need to get that help. But in the meantime, when you're not doing anything and you're getting sicker and deeply entrenched in your grief, Ayurveda and yoga can help because diet and lifestyle, two important things, even before we get to herbs, can make monumental differences. I'll give you an example. Like, I've had a client who was dealing with the loss of their parent and would not want to move, and they had a kapha imbalance. We'd already done that. One of the simple things I did with this person was, can you take out your workout clothes and shoes the night before? Don't ask yourself you want to do this. Make this a habit over motivation. And that comes from Ayurveda. Look at the imbalances, offer help. Don't judge them. Oh, you don't move, you overeat. No one is
Yeah.
trying to
Yeah.
sabotage themselves. So, yeah,
That's that's deep. That's profound. Shwetaji, you mentioned two words: sympathy and empathy.
right.
What's the difference? Where's the fine line? How do you kind of bifurcate one from the other?
So, from the way I understand is sympathy, also a good quality, is feeling bad, like what's happening in the world right now. We are sympathetic towards what's happening with the politics, and I don't want to make this conversation about that. With any extreme things going on in the world, we all feel sympathy for people who are suffering, right? So, there is genuine human connection and concern, like, oh, this is what is going wrong in the world where you live. I am so sorry to hear that. But empathy goes deeper. To me, empathy as an Ayurvedic doctor, as a grief coach, as a trauma informed yoga teacher, or even a health speaker or writer, right? Empathy is the core of how I connect with people. Empathy is me not knowing your mom, you not knowing my parents, but putting yourself in their shoes, me putting myself in your shoes. Imagine what you must feel where there you are creating a beautiful life for your family, like your independent unit, and your mom was suffering and you didn't even know she was suffering. That empathy is me putting myself in your shoes and saying, Harmanjeet, I get it. What can we do with the guilt? Guilt would be finding that purpose and helping other women because that's where your healing happens. Empathy for you would be saying, like we talked about the grief coaching, but oh shit, I get it. Like how is your work, is it helping others, what can I do? That's empathy. Wanting to, not pretending I understand your story. Every woman goes through menopause, I will too at some point. Not pretending I understand your mother's story, but being wanting to understand what is it that you're going through. Can we connect in human as humans? Can we build a community? Can we communicate this to a smaller and a larger audience, whoever would benefit from it? So I feel like sympathy comes with boundaries. It says I feel so bad, then I go about my day, versus empathy comes with I feel you, I understand your struggle, friend, what can we do? So there's one is being in that space of the other person suffering. The other thing is, oh, I feel bad, there's sympathy, I can also donate, whether that's money, time. Sympathy could also be that. Empathy really means being down in the trenches.
My take on this is that, usually, I mean, it's a human nature. You always start with empathy. You always start with feeling for the other person. But
Right.
how it translates is gradually that you start to pity that person. Oh God, you're going through this, are you? And this is usually the case with women who are going through menopause. It's not that we are indifferent towards them, but we don't know when that empathy actually turns or transforms into sympathy. Oh, you going through menopause. Oh, it must be so tough for you. Till now, it wasn't. But after hearing this particular line, the lady starts to think, oh, God, I mean, is it? I should be feeling a feeling of suffering. I should be suffering, that means. And slowly it turns, she herself starts to believe this.
Mm.
So, unless and until we actually kind of raising awareness about menopause is one thing, but what are you raising awareness about? Specific causes, specific cells. Menopause is a very, very large term.
Right.
Until now, uh, internet is full of medical symptoms and medical advices and medical this and medical that, but nobody is talking about the human side of menopause. And first thing, probably, we should be trying to, I would say, dissect is the difference between how empathy turns into sympathy and eventually the lady who's actually going through a brain fog phase, a semi depressive phase, a disillusionment phase, starts to believe, oh God, this is something really heavy that's come on me. And this is something that I should pity myself for.
So
You
it's
know,
not just that, Harmanjeet. It's also the grief aspect of it. You going through transition, you're going through a different phase of life. Where are we holding space for that grief? And this is where I love Ayurveda and yoga because we remind women when you get to that phase, it's finally your turn to take care of you. It's finally your turn to prioritize you. It's finally your turn to say, I matter. But yes, all of that happens. But can we just pause and acknowledge that there is grief in these transitions too? And I've had people come and tell me, oh, you're so lucky you've not gone through menopause. And I understand. I was like, I understand where you're coming from because no one has held space for your grief of the world tells you how you are a woman, what stages make you a woman, right? We don't talk about these things. We just say, oh, big deal. Now you don't have to worry. But you're not understanding what they need. We are assuming what their struggles were. So that comes back to your point of we are pitying them, but we are not holding space. We're not empathizing for what they might be grieving. I mean, we could go on, and I think this might make for another round of great
I was about
conversation.
to say that. I was about to say that. I would really, really love that, in a future podcast like this, we create space for specifically this particular topic. And you explain it so well, you break it up so nicely, you actually start to, go layer by layer. So I would definitely wish and request you, Shwetaji, that at a later, in one of the upcoming sessions that we're going to have together, we should really talk about this in depth.
I am all up for it. I think the more we create awareness, we empower women and we educate men, right? The one
Absolutely.
thing
That is what is required.
I also tell my female clients is don't expect people to understand what you're going through. Communicate. And it doesn't have to be one day I just exploded and I said and no one understood. No, we've not been trained. Women oftentimes don't express themselves because people will have judgments around it. Oh, it must be that time.
Opinions.
She always
Yeah.
reacts. No, so
Yeah.
but we
She's
this is
throwing
where
tantrums again.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so men need to be educated as well. Like, no, don't do that. You literally cannot do that. Like, be kind and compassionate with the person who's either brought you into this world, who's brought your children into the world, who's a friend, an in-law, a sister, a sibling, a mother-in-law, whatever. Be it, hold space, just hold space and ask what she needs. But at the same time, we as women also need to start communicating more because you know what? We deserve better. We deserve to be heard, and it's a natural part of life. You give your entire life to nurturing others. To your mom's point, Harmanjit, bringing it home. When she needed, she felt isolated and alone. And I have heard this from my clients. I've heard this from my friends or cousins, whatever have you, how they felt. And, we are navigating something new when you go through this phase. it's important to bring your loved ones into your trust circle, to have a community where you have these conversations where you don't feel isolated, because end of the day, this is grief also, this transition which goes unacknowledged. You're just supposed to wake up and be okay with this transition, right? And there is grief, and where are we holding space? Grief, something I want to end with, is not just the loss of a loved one. Grief is a loss that you were not expecting, right? You were not prepared for. Is the reaction to any kind of loss. It's a transition of life, be it health, be it loss of job, a relationship, or death of a pet or a loved one or a friendship, right? So this too is grief, and it's incumbent upon us as fellow human beings to hold space for anyone going through this.
You've said it nicely, Shwetaji. And really, it paves the way for another video where we should be talking about sympathy and empathy and dissecting it further. And you've brought it to a point whereby this gives me a lot of food for thought. So thank you so much for joining, for expressing so beautifully, and to be a part of this small little initiative that we've started.
It was my pleasure, Harmanjeet. Keep doing the good work that you're doing. And just a reminder, the work that you do helps in your own healing. And I say this from experience. The more people I help, I feel I'm helping my parents. We don't always get to help the people we love, but we use their love as a tool to motivate us to do better work. And you're doing that.
True, true, true. Thank you so much, Swetaji.
My
It
pleasure.
was a bliss speaking to you, and we be waiting for the next session with you. Thank you
I look
so
forward
much.
to it. Thank you. And thanks
Thank you
to
so
everyone who
much.
tuned in.
Thank you.